us a third grader from St. John's the Baptist School, Danielle Rosanova. She's going to come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless America.
God bless America. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Bryson, publisher of the Roxborough Times and the sponsor of tonight's program. We at the Times believe a well-informed electorate is vital to the survival of our democratic form of government. It is in this interest that we provide you with a chance to meet and question those people who want to represent you. We hope you find this forum to be informative. At this time, I'd like to introduce Janet Gross, Managing Editor of the Times, who will give the guidelines for tonight's program.
Thank you. Our format tonight is a forum, with each candidate having 5 minutes for a presentation, followed by a maximum of 10 minutes for questions from the audience. Wherever possible, both candidates for a particular office have been scheduled to speak back-to-back. However, in some instances, only one representative for a particular office is scheduled to appear. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Karen Gallen, our community representative from Bella, Pennsylvania, who will be introducing our candidates tonight.
Good evening. Our first speaker this evening is going to be Bernard Tompkin, the Democratic candidate for U.S. Congress, 13th District.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am running for office for Congress as an average citizen who cares very deeply about our country, and I care very deeply about a number of issues that affect all of us at this time. My mother and father came to this country at a very early age, seeking an opportunity to work and to live and to develop a family and find an opportunity to flourish in a country where people could live without regard to race, religion, color, gender, age, or national origin. And it was in this environment of gratitude and appreciation that I grew up, and I have felt for a long time that I wanted to serve my country in a dimension that could be useful. And I have served in the public light for many years. I've been a teacher, I've been a school administrator, Roxborough High School vice principal. I have taught at Temple University and Pennsylvania State University. And in this capacity, I've gotten to know thousands of students and thousands of parents and scores of people in the community, and I've gotten to know what their problems are and what people care about and what they are worried about and what their concerns are. I have dealt with people in a hands-on basis, and I've come to learn in a very direct fashion what the real vital concerns of men and women and children happen to be. And I am running for office because I care a great deal about issues of health care, of education, of environment, of jobs and good wages. These are issues which are very important to me. In terms of education, which I know something about, I think in this country we need a new national priority, a stronger national priority toward education. In the last few years, the federal budget has been cut, and cut strongly, in areas that affect a lot of people. College education is becoming less and less affordable. I know, for one, programs in special education which help kids who are handicapped, emotionally disturbed, kids who have various mental and physical handicaps. These programs have been cut, have been slashed, even though the federal government, since 1975, has mandated that programs be set up to afford equal opportunity to all youngsters. And I think that is wrong. And I think it is wrong, too, that we do not have programs in health care that affect people who are elderly, people with long-term diseases like Alzheimer's disease, children who are bedridden or home-ridden. There was a bill, the Pepper Bill, which came up in the 1988 Congress. The bill was defeated. I am in favor of that bill. My opponent voted against it. I believe that the priorities involved in that bill were stronger than the detriments, and there were some, but I think we have to take measures to move ahead. I've been very concerned, too, with problems of our environment. We all live in one capsule. That's what our planet is. We all breathe the same air, the same water, drink the same water. We have to eat the same food, and if the food is unsafe, we are all victims. We are all victims.
Mr. Tom, your time is up.
Any questions for Mr. Conklin?
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lawrence Coughlin, Republican candidate for U.S. Congress, 13th District.
Thank you very much, and my congratulations to the Times for having this candidates night. I'm proud of what we together have been able to do over the past years. Just in this term of Congress, we've been able to get the money to rebuild the Gresham Valley Bridge in Chestnut Hill. That bridge has now been torn down. It was the only one that SEPTA had closed and couldn't use, and we have the money to fix that up. Here in Roxborough, we culminated a long, long battle together to close down the Northwest incinerator, and that nuisance is now closed. In Manayunk, you see the continued rebirth of that area that started with urban development action grants that we were able to get for that community, and that growth continues because that seed money was provided by the federal government. I'm equally proud of the people who are endorsing my candidacy in this election. The National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare are endorsing my candidacy because of my work and record on behalf of older Americans, and I think that's important work. The National Education Association is endorsing my candidacy because of my work and record on behalf of education. The Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters are endorsing my candidacy because of my work and record on behalf of the environment. The Fraternal Order of Police is endorsing my candidacy because of my work and record in terms of crime and drug abuse. The veterans of foreign wars are endorsing my candidacy because of my record on behalf of veterans, and many labor organizations are endorsing my candidacy because of my work on behalf of working men and women. I want to continue in Congress because with George Bush, I want to see the continuation of the economic expansion that has meant jobs and opportunity to your children and to mine and to all our people. Economic expansion without the kind of inflation that robbed the pockets of old people and the kind of high interest rates that meant old young people couldn't buy a home. I want to continue in Congress because with George Bush, I want to see our children live in peace and freedom. I know a strong America is an investment in peace and in freedom. It lets us reduce the burden of defense and negotiate new treaties. and know the alternative is unilateral disarmament that's not good for the opportunity for your children and mine to live in peace and in freedom. And I want to continue in Congress because with George Bush, I want to see an America devoted to family values, a drug-free America, better educational standards for our children, daycare and educational care and medical care for our working Americans and retired working Americans. I know that the alternative is a society that coddles criminals, that eschews family values, and that disregards the needs of working men and working women. In any administration, small decisions may be wrong, but the big decisions, decisions that mean peace or war, that mean whether we progress ahead on economic expansion or return to a sluggish economy, the decisions that turn the moral course of history have got to be right. I want to see a tall America that continues to move forward with the kind of growth and expansion that we've had. And again, my thanks and congratulations to the Times.
Our next speaker will be Gregory Naylor, representing Don Bailey, Democratic candidate for State Auditor General.
Thank you. Good evening. What I'd like to do is in three parts. Number one, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Auditor General's office. Number two, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Don Bailey, the Auditor General. And number three, I'd like to tell you some of the things that Don has done since he's been in office. Let me start off with a very simple premise. The Auditor General's basic responsibility is the watchdog of the state funds. Simply put, those funds which the state are entitled to are deposited in the state treasury. We are to see that those funds are dispensed properly and legally. How do we do this? There's several ways that we do this. We, in fact, virtually audit all the dollars in the state with some exceptions. One exception is the Pennsylvania Turnpike. The other exception is the State Highway and Building Authority. The other one is the State Public Building Authority, the General Assembly, and finally the Judiciary. Now, each year we perform thousands of audits, literally thousands of audits. What we audit, who we audit, I'm going to try to give you a sense of that. Obviously, we can't audit every agency that receives state funds because we just don't have the manpower to do that. But we do audit all state-owned institutions, hospitals, nursing homes, universities, prisons, correctional facilities, welfare offices, state-aided institutions, nursing homes, colleges, universities, educational institutions, municipal employees, police pension funds, fire relief funds, district justices, certain county offices. In Philadelphia, for instance, we audit the Register of Wills and the clerk of Quarter Sessions Court. In addition, we also audit 501 school districts, 66 vocational schools, and 29 intermediate units. We also audit over 700 state stores, and I want to say to you that we haven't touched a drop since we've been in there. Now, giving you a capsized view of what we do, let me talk a little bit about Don Bailey, who is the Auditor General. Don Bailey's from out west, from a little town called Greensburg. He was a scholar athlete at the University of Michigan, where he played in the Rose Bowl, was a Big Ten All-Star, played in the North-South game, and received a lot of other accolades academically as well. Upon his graduation, Don enlisted in the Army. He volunteered to serve in Vietnam. He spent 15 months in Vietnam. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to bear with me because Don does have a distinguished service record, and there are several medals that he received, and I don't want to screw this up. I want to get this just right. Don received, for bravery, a Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, an Army Commendation Medal with Valor, the Air Medal. He also received a Bronze Star and an Army Commendation Medal for meritorious service. After Don completed his stint in the service, he went to law school. But the interesting part about that is Don went to law school at night. He worked during the day, went to school in the evening, and finally got his law degree from Duquesne University. After that, Don ran for Congress. Shortly thereafter, he ran for Congress, was elected in 1978 from out western Pennsylvania, served for 2 terms. One of those 2 terms, he was on the House Ways and Means Committee, and some folks from Congress here know that to be a sophomore, to be on the House Ways and Means Committee is quite a compliment to a young congressman. Don, in fact, was elected congressman at the age of 33. While in Congress, let's talk about just a couple things that he had done. One, he was a prime sponsor in the Economic Recovery Tax Act, which in fact helped reinvest money into industry as well as save thousands of jobs in western Pennsylvania and throughout the state. Also, Don was co-sponsor of the Educational Amendment Bill for senior citizens, which was very helpful, of course, to senior citizens. In addition to that, Don was also responsible for the revolving state workmen's compensation fund, and if anybody is familiar with that, it's the money that folks receive their benefits from. That was in his tenure as Congress. Now, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the kinds of things that Don has done since he's been in office. Number one, Don has computerized the office. He's computerized it as much as you can with a budget that you're allowed through the General Assembly. Don has equalized pay for women. Don has increased hiring of minorities. Don has, in fact, brought to bear on county agencies and other institutions, and it has uncovered millions of dollars in fraud. And I see your hand. Does that indicate 1 minute, or does it indicate time is running out? Okay, I do want to wrap it up. I'm surprised that I rehearsed this and it was 3 minutes. I should have read it. But I do want to say that, one, I want to thank the Times, and two, we look forward to your support. Thank you.
John Logan, Republican candidate for State Senate, 7th District.
Well, I rehearsed my speech and it took 4 minutes, so if you bear with me, I'm going to read it. Okay. I'd like to thank first Mr. Bryson, the Times, and Wade Cablevision for sponsoring this event. During a presidential election year, we tend to focus on just that, the presidential candidates, and it's all too easy for the local candidates to go unnoticed. So events such as this are very important. We must remember that government starts here at the local level, and it is important that you, the voter, be given the opportunity to meet us and know where we stand, so on election day you can make an intelligent decision. Certainly the Times has worked hard to educate the community in this area. As you know, I am running for the State Senate Republican ticket on District 7. This district covers East Falls, parts of Roxborough, all of Manayunk, Germantown, and West Philadelphia. What we need in this district is first, better communication. I would say that the majority of the people on this side of the river have no idea who their senator is in Harrisburg. Indeed, I had a hard time in Manayunk convincing people that Senator Rox was not their senator and that it was Freeman Hankins. This is totally an unacceptable way to govern. To change this, I would form a District 7 council where 2 members from each area of the district would sit down together and discuss issues that affect the district. This way we have strong communication and we have a united district. And by being united, this district can accomplish many of their problems. We do have many problems to be worked out, and one way in turning things around is to speak and be united as one force. The key responsibility of a senator is to fight for the district, to stand up and demand the services we so rightfully deserve. And the best way, the most effective way, is by having the support of the entire district. And without open lines of communication, this is impossible. I stand here tonight asking for your vote on November 8th. And one question you may have is my experience. What would make me a good senator? For the last 11 years, I have worked at the Medical College of Pennsylvania as director of the Acute Care Lab and senior supervisor of the Department of Anesthesia. I'm a member of the American Society of Clinical Chemists, as well as the New York Academy of Science. I have served on faculty at Hahnemann University, as well as Gwen and Mercy College, in their allied health programs. I have been responsible for overseeing a budget of $1 million at the Medical College a year, and for the quality assurance programs and keeping the department and the lab current with government regulations. I have served as second vice president of the East Falls Community Council, and I have worked with crime prevention programs throughout the district. I have done volunteer work with the disabled veterans in the late 60s after spending 6 years in the United States Air Force. I have worked with United Way and the Philadelphia Health Management Office in training citizens in techniques of CPR all across the city, as well as work with the American Cancer Society. My background in problem-solving, financial management, and community service give me the experience needed to function in Harrisburg. I have been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, by the Southeastern Veterans Political Action Committee, by Ron Castile, our district attorney, and by Senator Joe Rox. As a Republican senator, I would join fellow Republicans, Rox and Salvatore, in the Senate to fight for the needs of the people of this district, for a better future for all of Philadelphia. It is my hope that we can raise our children and grandchildren in a drug-free environment, in a safe and well-protected environment, that they can attend a public school and graduate literate. It is difficult to believe that in this age, in this city, with all the educational resources we have at our disposal, that we have over 500,000 Philadelphians who do not have a high school diploma, and another 200,000 Philadelphians who could not read. To effectively combat crime and welfare, drug and alcohol abuse, we need an all-out war in the area of illiteracy. Frustration breeds crime, and I cannot imagine the frustration one would have not being able to read. Somewhere the system has failed, not only these people, but all of us. I urge you here tonight not to sit back and let things go on, but to get involved and fight back. To fight back hard until the services we pay for are returned, and we can live in a city that we can be proud of. On November 8th for the State Senate, on November 8th vote for the State Senate, you have a choice. And may I say that Mr. Fattah and I have campaigned hard, and all during this campaign we stuck to the issues and only the issues. We have campaigned in a professional manner in every way, never attacking each other personally, but rather campaigning in a way that brought honor and dignity back to the campaign, an art that appears sometimes to have been lost. As a Republican senator, I can... Okay, thank you. Didn't make it. Any questions?
Yeah. I have a question, please. Mr. Logan, throughout your speech, you mentioned some problems in this community. I was wondering what problems would you specifically address, as much information as you could give this evening on your term, so to understand.
Sure. I think the problems we face here in the communities, first and foremost, it would be police protection. I think the city here, who is going to be a first-class world city, has a police force that is inadequate to care and protect the needs of the citizens. I also think that I move on now to education, where my strongest point is on education. I feel that in the long term, the one way that we can combat drugs, we can combat crime, and we can restore order to our society is by educating our children. I feel that we have failed them in that respect, and as a city, I feel that we have an obligation to that. And as a senator and a member of the Senate, he also definitely has an obligation for that purpose. Okay.
And our next speaker will be Shaka Fattah, Democratic candidate for State Senate, 7th District.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me say a couple of things. One is that John Logan, I think, and myself have campaigned very hard, and I think that no matter who were to win on election day, that this district will be well served. Let me say that I've spent 6 years in the legislature, and my record is one in which I think that we've been involved in most of the major issues that have come before the legislature. I've been the prime sponsor of several major pieces of legislation. House Bill 4, which was signed by the governor, created a $20 million job training program to help dislocated workers and displaced homemakers. That was signed in February of this year. I also chaired the proprietary school sunset committee, and we passed a bill regulating proprietary schools in this state, which is now the national model for the regulation of such schools. I've co-sponsored a number of bills, the Domestic Abuse Act, the Spousal Rape Act, the Displaced Homemakers program that we now run in our 14 community colleges around the state. I've spent my 6 years in the legislature serving on the House Education Committee primarily. Even though I've served on other committees of the legislature, my primary emphasis has been in the area of higher education. I serve on the FIA board, which is the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, and we're about to give away our 1 millionth grant to a Pennsylvania student to go on to college. I serve as the Commonwealth trustee on Temple University's board of directors, and I've spent a lot of my energy and time trying to ensure that the higher education apparatus in this state helps the students here get an affordable quality education. And as I go on to the Senate, if that be the will of the voters in this district, I plan to continue to concentrate on higher education primarily, even though I realize that there are a number of other issues. A bill that I sponsored as the prompt sponsor passed the House in June, which would apply a mandatory sentence for people who, in the process of selling illegal narcotics, employ teenage children to participate in that activity, and would apply to them the stiffest mandatory sentence that we would have now on the books here in the Commonwealth, a 10-year minimum sentence. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. Beyond spending 6 years in the legislature, I worked prior to that in city government as a special assistant to the managing director. I've studied government administration, have a master's degree from University of Pennsylvania in government administration, and also participated and completed a program at the Kennedy School at Harvard for state and local executives to help them better understand the complex nature of government affairs and to hopefully aid them in carrying out some needed programs during their tenure in government. That's all I'll say, and I hope to use my additional time to answer any questions. Thank you.
Sir, on the literacy program, I hear they're having troubles, and I wondered why greater effort has not been made toward enlisting volunteers. There are a lot of high school and college graduates, retired, who could help. I would help myself if places were around available and be glad to help the kids.
Well, let me say a couple of things. One is that I agree with you. I've helped and fought for state funding for adult literacy programs in each of the 6 years that I've been in Harrisburg. We lost the first couple of times around, but we have been successful and now have a $2 million appropriation a year to help adult literacy programs around the state, essentially volunteer efforts. Here in Philadelphia, the Mayor's Commission on Literacy, we work with them. I've opened my district office, for example, to be a place so that people can have tutors come in and volunteers in the neighborhood work together to help people learn how to read. And let me just say another point on the general issue of constituent services. I've maintained a district office in my legislative district for 6 years. We've served thousands of constituents. As a senator, one of the plans that we have is to have a monthly town meeting. I think that John made a point, and that is to get people more involved. But rather than 2 people meeting with me, we're going to have an open town meeting once a month, every month, for the next 4 years, so that people can have an opportunity to interact with me and my staff as we try to solve some of the problems that face our community. You had your hand up?
In line with what you just said there, what specific steps would you take to make Manayunk and Roxborough in particular, as John had said earlier, and I know being a resident here that most people did know who their state senator was. What specific steps do you take to make a greater impact or make yourself more visible to the Roxborough-Manayunk area?
Well, let me just say a couple things on that. One is that I don't think that Manayunk should feel left out. I mean, there are plenty of areas of the senatorial district who are not certain as to who their senator was prior to this election. But Senator Hankins and his style over the last 21 years in the Senate was not one that I think lent itself to visibility. And so that's one issue. But beyond that, we intend to have for instance, a monthly town meeting. People will get notice in the mail every month as to the location of that meeting. We'll move it around the district. But every month, everybody will know that on a particular day of the month, and we'll have that published, that I'll be available. And hopefully Mr. Bryson and his paper will publish that information. In addition to that, I plan to have a centrally located district office, and we are also exploring the possibility, not a commitment to, but exploring the possibility of having a mobile office to help aid and service the district. Congressman Coughlin uses one, and I think he uses one effectively, and that's one of the things that we'll consider given what resources we may have to do that. Next question. Don't be shy. Yes.
You're probably aware that Manioc has made a very, the business section's made a very nice renaissance. One of the problems right now is parking. I'm not sure if that's an issue that you can handle, but have you any thoughts or solutions in that area?
Well, I spent some part of last spring. In fact, me and Mr. Bryson had lunch, and we walked a little bit on the business strip, and he talked specifically about the issue of parking to me as a concern in this neighborhood. And so I'm aware of the issue. I'm also aware that that the City Planning Commission and that those people who at the city level are involved with neighborhood organizations here are trying to work to see to what extent that can be resolved along with the business association. I would be willing to use my offices to be of whatever assistance we could be. What exactly we could do from the state senate seat to aid that problem, I'm not sure, but one of the things that I found over the last 6 years, and when I talk about this monthly town meeting, it's not a new idea. For the last 6 years, I've had a monthly meeting in my legislative district and made myself available on the first Saturday of every month for 3 hours to talk to people about problems. It's to the extent that we communicate with each other about problems. There may indeed be things that we can do to help solve some problems like that. Thank you for having me.
Our next speaker will be Richard Hayden, Democratic candidate for State Representative, 194th District.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the co-sponsors of this event, the Roxborough Times and Wade Cablevision, for giving us an opportunity to be able to discuss our various positions before not only the constituents in the audience, but those hopefully on a ever-increasing television audience. I represent the 194th District, and I'm just finishing up my first term. The 194th District, for those of you who don't know, is represented by the areas of Roxborough, most of Manioc, actually all of Manioc, most of Roxborough, Wissahickon, part of Lower East Falls, a section known as Woodside Heights, or also known as Bowen Park, and the Winfield section of the city. I'm just finishing up my first 2 years in Harrisburg, and I was thinking on the way here this evening, what was one of the reasons why I wanted to be a state representative and why I wanted to represent this district. And one of the main reasons is because I saw that what was happening at the federal level was that more important decisions were going to be increasingly the responsibility of state legislatures. So before I was even sworn in, I lobbied and received an important position on a committee which I think affects not only this area but also the city and the entire state, and that's the House Conservation Committee. It was unusual for a Philadelphian to get involved in a committee like that because no one from the city of Philadelphia had even seen through the issues and had enough interest to do that before. So through my position on the House Conservation Committee and through my work through a lot of hearings and a lot of activity on the issue, I played a major role in two real important pieces of legislation which the governor recently signed. The first was the Solid Waste Act, and that's the bill that we passed, which is now going to require that every community over a certain population recycle a minimum of 25% of its waste. It also requires local counties and communities to have long-term plans for solid waste disposal. Those of us who live in the city of Philadelphia know we seem to be bouncing from crisis to crisis. And one of the reasons we put that in the bill was to require that counties have that kind of planning provision. And I'm happy to report that I understand that yesterday at a press conference, the City Streets Department announced that the section of Manioc is going to be included in the recycling portion of the city's recycling plan. The other major conservation bill that I was involved in was the House Hazardous Waste Bill. It was recently signed by the governor also in July. That's a bill which not only will help clean up our existing toxic waste sites that we have around the state and including some areas of the city of Philadelphia, but also provide long-term alternatives to hazardous waste disposal and also prevent the same kind of tragedies and accidents that we've seen has happened not only in the state of Pennsylvania but particularly in some of the other neighboring states. One of the other issues which I brought my attention to almost immediately was the car insurance issue. It's probably the single most important issue in terms of the volume of mail and phone calls that I get, and it's certainly one that's personally important to me when I get my now quarterly bill from my insurance carrier. Right after I got to Harrisburg, I worked pretty closely on the issue with the governor's administration and introduced the governor's car insurance proposal. It's unfortunate that we didn't get the kind of support around the state that we needed, and it's a continuing priority of both mine, the governor, and other members of the Philadelphia delegation. I also sit on the House Judiciary Committee, and that's a committee through which a major criminal and courts legislation comes through. I was appointed there in January. A couple of the important issues that we're dealing with, once again for the city and for the entire state, is the entire issue of drugs and how we're going to handle drug abuse. We had a couple of tools which I think are going to be effective in helping law enforcement deal with the issue. The first is we enacted a specific provision which would permit local district attorneys and local police to seize property. In this particular case, it would be automobiles, houses, and other kinds of property which individual people use for the purpose of selling and transferring drugs. The idea behind that is to use the federal program, which has been successful in doing that, and permit local county officials to take some of the profit out of the drug dealing that we've had in the city of Philadelphia. And I'm happy to report that District Attorney Ron Castile and the city is already using that bill, and I think it's going to be an effective tool. Another area in terms of trying to deal with effective enforcement of drug laws has been the wiretap bill. Just through the House Judiciary Committee, and as recently as our last couple days in session, we reauthorized the extension of the Wiretap Act, which is going to give law enforcement the opportunity to use wiretaps to involve greater levels of drug dealing and prosecution. And I think it's a local tool that law enforcement wanted, and certainly one that we supplied to them. Representative Fatah mentioned his bill, which is a mandatory sentencing bill for those who use children for the sale and the trafficking of drugs. I was one of only 5 or 6 co-sponsors of Representative Fatah's bill on that mandatory sentencing provision and voted for it both in committee and on the House floor. The only mandatory sentence bill which I did not support during my first 2 years was a bill which would provide a mandatory minimum sentence of 1 year for the sale or possession with intent to deliver of narcotics. And the reason I did that was because at the same time we were reviewing that bill, we had before us on the House Judiciary Committee what are called sentencing guidelines. And the guidelines are set up by the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission, which is composed of the Attorney General, District Attorneys Association, Common Pleas Court judges, and victims and other people involved in the criminal system. And the sentencing guidelines address, I think, the drug issue in a much broader concept. They deal with whether an individual defendant has had a prior record, has been involved in drugs before, what the amounts and the quantities involved in a particular arrest were, and mandate that judges impose stiffer sentences for that kind of activity. The bill which we had before simply imposed, regardless of any individual's prior record, an individual could have been 18 years old, have had no juvenile record, could have been involved in only one incident with another 17-year-old at his high school, and received 1 year sentence for jail. And I thought that with the cost of our prisons being approximately $20,000 a year, with the sentencing guidelines, I didn't think that was a proper way to go. In addition to being an active legislator, I think that I have a responsibility with the constituents at home, and to be available and to do as much constituent work as possible. As soon as I got elected, we opened up 2 district offices, one over here in the 21st Ward and one in the 52nd Ward. We've dealt with a whole range of issues through there. I've tried to work with community groups on specific issues, and I've also been as active as I can in trying to work out individual problems. The last thing I'd like to report on is generally what I call the state of the state. During the past 2 years, the economic state of Pennsylvania has been very healthy, and we're happy to report that. We ran a substantial surplus in my first year, which is 1987. The governor put a certain amount of that money aside for tax reform, which in our House version would require that the city wage tax be reduced by 0.3%. Okay, thanks. I don't see the yellow light. I guess I'll look for your finger, Paul. In addition, I think that what we're trying to do is to be more active at the state role for the city of Philadelphia. I've enjoyed my first 2 years in Harrisburg. It's been my privilege to serve not only the 194th District, but the city of Philadelphia. And with your continued support, I'll continue to build on the progress that we developed during the first term. Thank you.
And now Joseph Kennedy, the Republican candidate for State Representative, 194th District.
I'm Joe Kennedy, and I'm running as a Republican for state representative in this area. First thing I'd like to tell you about is myself a little bit. I'm young, I'm Irish, I'm Catholic, and I have this incredible urge to compare myself to John Kennedy. But I think his name's been bandied about a little bit too much in this election, so I won't compare him to him. But what I will do is I'll tell you a little bit about my family background in this area. My grandfather, Edward Kennedy, was the Democratic ward leader of the 21st Ward in the 1930s. And my grandfather, Benjamin Whitaker, was the Democratic committeeman in this ward in the 1930s. And a lot of people say, well, why aren't you a Democrat? And I say, hey, I'm right where they were. In 1930, a Republican administration in this city was strangling this city to death. And right now, in 1980, we're facing a Democratic administration in this city that is strangling this city to death. And if we don't change it, if we don't oppose it right now, if we don't change it in 1991, there aren't going to be a whole lot left to pay any taxes in this city. So that's what I'm about, and that's what I want to talk to you about tonight, and some of the things we can do about that. A little bit about me personally. I lived in Roxborough until I was about 5. My parents moved to Olney and then moved to Ardmore, and I grew up mainly in Ardmore. I came back to Roxborough because I know a lot of people here. I have a lot of family, and it's a good community to live in and to work in with the people. I attended St. Joseph's College, graduated in 1982. I graduated from St. Temple Law School in 1985. I worked downtown as a lawyer, mainly in securities litigation, commercial litigation, which doesn't really prepare you for much except to write and to tell a good story now and again. I've done volunteer work, CYO basketball coach. I've coached freshman football. I've also volunteered some time at St. Edmund's Home for Crippled Children. So while I've been in this community for a short time, I've done community work in other areas. What I like to say about this election right now is that every week I seem to pick up a couple articles in the paper about the city, and I like to comment on them. And I'd like to show you some of the articles that are going on now. Just this Saturday, there's an article, "City must pay court costs, taxes may go up," Good says. And another article about the Justice Center. The Justice Center bids far surpass city's estimates. Now, if you remember this debacle, in the spring, the city had a bid, they had 3 bids on the Justice Center, and they took the high bid. They discarded the low bid, and they took the high bid. Why? Because they claimed it was the only qualified bid, because it was the only bid to meet the 35% minority requirement for contracting. So once they found out a little bit more about this person who had the contracting firm, for one, that he had a criminal sentence for selling heroin, and 2, that his company had been bankrupt once before, they finally decided that they couldn't give it to him. So they go from this $30 million bid to this bid now of $100 million. There's $70 million right there. That's my money, that's your money. I'm angry about it, and you should be angry about it. It can't go on, and we're going to stop it. Another thing that really gets my goat, in the local paper, district pulls its beat cops. The city cut, the first thing they cut was the police force, and they cut police protection. And to me, that's no way to run a city. And we have a right to combat it. We don't have to stand around and take it, and we're going to combat it. What I propose to work on as legislation is I'm going to go up to Harrisburg, and I'm going to force this city's hands to restore our police protection. They're not giving us what we deserve, what we pay for, and what we need to live in this city. The second thing I'm going to do, and this is a little bit controversial, but I'm going to call an end to contracts, to giving out contracts based on the color of a person's skin. It's time we went back, it's time we started a colorblind society. and we skew government, and we create more racial tension when we give out preferences, 35% preferences. I want to end it. I want to give out contracts based on the ability of the company to do the work, to do it competently. The other thing I'm going to do, which was another issue, the city threatened to cut non-public school busing. The school district threatened to cut non-public school busing. I'm going to go up there and support aid to non-public schools because for many parents in this area, and as one of 13 children, I know that the non-public schools in this area are really the only alternative for many people. So I'm controversial, but I'm going to fight for you. If you believe in me, if you want me in there, vote for me. If you like the things the way they are, then you have your candidate in Dick Hayden. Thanks a lot. Any questions?
This bid that comes up so high for the construction work.
Right.
Who has the right to call in auditors? Somebody ought to be called in on that.
Well, that's interesting you should say that. Senator Rox and Senator Salvatore have been working on a plan to open up the city books to an auditor overseer. It's basically, it's using a state bill, a state law, that was originally, you would say, designed for western steel towns who were depressed and were financially difficult. If a certain number of voters petition to have the government, the state government appoint an auditor overseer, and an auditor overseer will come in, look at the city books, and decide how that city operates. Senator Rox and Senator Salvatore and myself and many other people in this city believe that this city is in such a financial disaster and chaos that we should have an auditor overseer. I fully support that. And if you want, I can bring out a petition to your home so you can sign it. It's just, it's nothing, it's an auditor overseer to look at the books, and that's what we deserve. And that's just an example of what a state representative can do to counteract some of the things going on in the city. So I'll talk to you afterwards and I'll tell you where you can sign that.
Right.
Okay? Any other questions?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
What time element would that take to attack down at City Hall? Is it going to take a month, 6 months, a year?
For what? The auditor overseer?
Right.
I'm not real sure of that. What the time?
For another 4 years, couldn't it?
Well, it could be opposed. We'll probably meet some opposition on it, but it's time to start now. Whether it takes 3 or 4 years, maybe it will, but if we push hard enough, it won't take that long. And if we push and push and push, and keep saying it and keep saying it, finally it'll get through to someone's head that, hey, they're in trouble. And they might be in trouble in 1991 if they don't start straightening up their act. So what we're about is just pushing them, and hopefully the pressure, even the pressure of that being there, is a hammer that you use to sort of encourage good government. If you're going to have an auditor overseer appointed, you have a real nice incentive to start operating efficiently and start using our money wisely. So even if it's fought, the actual auditor overseer is fought, I think the process of doing it is will reap its benefits even before that. But I'm not real sure exactly how long it's going to take and what time frame we're talking about.
But you get started now then.
Well, we have it. The petition signatures are being signed right now. They are. Okay.
I have a question to add.
Sure.
Many times you see a person in politics ever be questioned about what he's doing is when the FBI investigates him. Ab scam and the fellow they caught taking trying to bribe the contractor downtown.
Right.
Why couldn't the FBI or some other federal agency come in without having to go through an auditor and just tell them to open the books? It's mandatory to say you have to open your books.
Well, the FBI is a criminal investigation. So there has to be some sort of evidence, probable cause of actual criminal activity. While I accuse the people in City Council and the City Administration of many things, I am one and not willing to accuse anyone of criminal activity unless there is some evidence of it. So in those certain circumstances where criminal activity is occurring, such as Icon with Boo Burris stealing federal and state money that was supposed to go to housing for the poor, then the criminal activity gets involved, but it's only a very limited area, and just to address that limited problem. So, you keep going, you keep putting, like you say, you keep putting out fires. You keep going here to there, and here. So it's not, so you can't really get, there's no process to get the whole city in this investigation of the FBI or of any other regulatory agency unless we do this auditor overseer. And just let me say, I mean, signatures have been signed and we're close to what we need. It's 60,000 signatures citywide. So, you know, hopefully we'll have something soon. Yes?
This position of auditor you've been talking about sounds awful familiar. In fact, it sounds a lot like the position of city controller, which Joe Vignola apparently did a very good job at. I remember during his first term in office, he pointed out several areas of oversight. Isn't what you're proposing duplicative of what the city controller does?
Well, we might disagree on the job that Joe Vignola did, and that might be a disagreement since you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican, or maybe, you know, since you support, you know, Richard Hayden and presumably Wilson Good and City Council. I don't think he did I object to that. Well, I'm just answering your question. Let me answer your question. I don't think he did a good enough job, okay? I think there are plenty of things that I think it's obvious. This is just a week from newspaper articles. I couldn't even say the articles from when I started to run this campaign. It's obvious that he didn't do a good enough job. It's obvious that someone else has to do the job. So I'm not saying Joe Vignola is a terrible city controller, and I don't think it's duplicative. I think we need someone independent, someone removed from the system, someone removed from the Democratic Party, from the Democratic power structure, to look at it. And that's all I'm saying. I mean, you may say, you know, you may say it's redundant, but I disagree.
Joe Vignola was elected, he wasn't appointed by the mayor, and I'm not here to praise Joe Vignola, but it seems like you're proposing an extra layer of bureaucracy that the taxpayers are going to have to ultimately pay for.
Well, I'd rather pay for that than $70 million more in a justice center. I mean, I know what you're saying. It's fine. It's a good argument, but I'd say it's a wrong argument. I disagree with it. And I don't think it's duplicative, and I think we need it. You think the city controller does a good enough job? I think the evidence is otherwise. And that's all I can say. I mean, you know, we have a difference of opinion. That's what politics is all about. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to, first of all, commend the Roxborough Times and Wade Cablevision for sponsoring this event tonight to give us candidates an opportunity to talk to the people in the neighborhoods and give us a chance to bring our message to the people who are ultimately responsible for putting us in office and the people who we're accountable to while serving in office. So I look forward to the opportunity and look forward to telling you about things that I've been able to do in Harrisburg, but more importantly, what I'm looking forward to as we go forward for the next term. I've had the good fortune, with the support of people like yourselves, the good fortune of serving in the General Assembly for the last 6 years. I didn't start out in a career ladder of someone who desired to be a public official. Quite frankly, my desire in life was to serve people. And I started out, quite frankly, working in the counseling realm, working with children and families. I'm working at the School District of Philadelphia in the counseling program, and working at Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic doing family counseling. And my objective there was to help people solve problems. But one of the things I began to look at, began to recognize that public policy was having a tremendous impact on the lives of everyday people. That in order to really resolve some of the problems that they were having in their homes, some of the problems that they were having in their neighborhoods, it became important that you work to change the public policy that's impacting on their lives. And I sought out to do that by working for candidates. Then again, not desiring to be an elected official, but once again desiring to change policy that were impacting on the lives of everyone in this community. And by doing that, some things came up, and I heard a gentleman make reference to AppScan and some other things that took place in public life here in the city of Philadelphia. And because of that, a gentleman who I worked for many years, who's now Secretary of Welfare, John White, went on to City Council. And at that point, there was a vacancy in the state legislature. And I decided at that point in time that it was time for me not to pursue public policy in another direction. Being at the head of the opportunities in Harrisburg to author, legislate, and create laws that would impact the lives and improve the quality of life of all the people in this neighborhood. So I set forth approximately 6 years ago to do that. And I'm very happy to say that after 6 years, there's been some success. One of the major issues that, even at that time, Representative Joe Rox and John White was working on was related to SEPTA. I remember at that time there was a select committee that was investigating SEPTA, and one of the issues that was still remaining from that select committee was the issue related to the need to have a controller to monitor the books at SEPTA so that we can have a better feel on how our monies were being spent. And that's been a long-standing issue. And I'm proud to say that now, today, through my efforts and also through the efforts of some of the people that spoke before, that we now have a controller who is responsible for reporting to the General Assembly and to the governor the amount of money that's being spent at SEPTA. We also have a funding formula, one that's much more predictable, so that the transit agency knows at this point in time when they go into each fiscal year that they're going to get 70.3% of the money that's been appropriated for mass transit. We also have the funding formula that now requires SEPTA, once and for all, to give some report on performance so we can begin to see what they're doing with their on-time performance and how they're responding to the ridership. So we now have an opportunity there to make some improvements. But that's not all. We have an opportunity in the future to make more improvements. And I'm glad to say that the governor, through his efforts and the efforts of the city administration, we put forth a new chairman of the board of SEPTA. And I think if you read through the newspapers, and I understand the gentleman pretty early was talking about newspaper articles, and if you read through the newspaper recently, you'll probably see to the point that a state investigation revealed that there was a lot of corruption and other things that were involved in that transit authority. But we now have a firm general manager who's going to do a good job. We now have a chairman of the board who we think is going to move forward with some very progressive, effective controls to make sure the system operates. And we now hopefully will have on the General Assembly that will work towards making sure that we have the kind of funding we need for mass transit. There's been several things I've heard tonight that's been alarming. One of the most difficult tasks that we have in the General Assembly is representing the city of Philadelphia. And I want to go on record here tonight to say that yes, I have some tremendous problems with some things that are going on in city government. And I think that Dick Hayden would say that, I think that Bob O'Donnell would say that, but we have a burden. We have a burden to go to the state capitol and represent the people from the city of Philadelphia. And with that burden, even though we may disagree with what's going on in city council, what's going on sometime in the mayor's office, and we fight and we battle and we work towards that, but we do that as a family. Because we understand that when there's problems in family, you try to deal with them within family. But you don't go to Harrisburg when the rest of the state wants to fight against us anyway for every dime that we try to get in terms of airing our dirty linen up there. So we choose not to do that. I took a stand on the convention center. It was not a popular stand. The mayor was opposed to my stand. Some people in Center City was opposed to my stand. But I said once and for all, if we're going to have a convention center, it must in fact be one in which is not going to put a burden on the taxpayers of the city of Philadelphia. That was not a popular stand. It was against the city. But I did not go to Harrisburg fighting against the city of Philadelphia. I went to Harrisburg to represent the people in the district who sent me there. That's what I plan to do again if I'm fortunate to be elected by the voters from the 200th legislative district. Thank you very much.
And now Mr. Robert Rossman, the Republican candidate for the State Representative 200th District.
Hi, I'm Bob Rossman. I live in Chestnut Hill. For those of you who don't know where the 200th District is, it runs from the Schuylkill River over to Cheltenham Avenue all along the northwestern border of the city. It's a standard gerrymander designed by politicians to make sure that a Democrat is always elected to the state legislature from that district. But nevertheless, I'm the Republican running for that office. This is the first time that the office has really been contested since the office was first created after the census in 1980. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, where I'm coming from, and who I am. I was not born and raised in Philadelphia. I was born and raised in Atlantic City. My parents still live there, but I have been a resident of Philadelphia for the past decade, And I've worked in and around Philadelphia for about 20 years. I'm 45 years old now. And as I've spent more time in Philadelphia and seen more of what's going on, I've gotten more and more upset about the way the city's being run and the way our lives are impacted by the city government. And I've decided that it's time to try to do something about that. If we continue to allow people to be elected by default without contesting seats, then we're acquiescing to the way the city is being run. I don't like the way the city is being run. I think some dramatic changes have to be made, and I think that it's not too early to start making those changes. Even though I'm running against the city of Philadelphia, the government of the city of Philadelphia, I'm running for an office in Harrisburg. And I don't think that's inconsistent. I think a lot of what happens in Philadelphia is controlled in Harrisburg. For instance, the wage tax is decided in Harrisburg. It's not decided in City Hall. Maybe that's not the way it should be, but that's the way it is. The wage tax is decided in Harrisburg. And I think that the wage tax is killing the city of Philadelphia, that it's much too high, and what it does is it tells everyone with a good job that they're better off leaving the city. It tells every company that provides good jobs that they're better off leaving the city. And we can look at the history and see how that works. The city of Philadelphia used to have 90% of the jobs in the Philadelphia metropolitan area. It now has less than half. And the jobs that are leaving Philadelphia are the better jobs. And as soon as someone who lives in Philadelphia gets a job in the suburb, the first thing they have to think of is, do I really want to stay in the city? You know, I can get a 5% raise by leaving the city, by moving out of the city. And then they look across the city borders, especially where we live, where the city border is so close that really all we're talking about is moving a couple blocks. We don't have to give up our friends. We don't have to give up our social life. If we just move a couple blocks, we're out of the city. Our trash gets picked up. We've got good police protection. We've got good fire protection, as good as in the city, certainly. And our taxes go down. I know a number of people who have left the city, and they said it's just amazing. It costs, even though I bought a new house, I paid more for the house, the interest rate is higher on my mortgage, and yet my monthly payments are lower because the taxes are so much lower, and the services are all there. Everything that I wanted. They pick up my trash on time. The streets are clean. It's just an amazing difference. And that shouldn't be. There's no reason why the services shouldn't be just as good in the city of Philadelphia. But they're not going to be as long as city services are considered a jobs program instead of a service program. In the city of Philadelphia, the point of having city departments is to provide jobs. It's not to provide services to the taxpayers. And I think that's wrong. And I don't think it'll go on much longer. As the city chases wage earners out of the city with the wage tax, eventually the whole system's going to collapse. And the democratic machine can't keep supporting itself through city jobs when there's no taxpayers left to pay for them. And basically, that's what I want to do. That's why I want to go to Harrisburg. It's really not a very complicated message. It's lower taxes and better services. I don't think the city of Philadelphia should be allowed to collapse. At one point in my past, I was working in Detroit. And I've seen a city that has collapsed. I don't want that to happen to Philadelphia. So I want to go to Harrisburg and make a difference.
Well, how about Pittsburgh? Haven't they improved things a lot?
I don't know Pittsburgh. From what I've read, they have improved things a lot. It is possible for cities to change. It is possible for cities to be improved. It almost happened here with Clark and Dilworth. You saw a tremendous change in the city then, a tremendous amount of pride in the city, tremendous improvements in the city, but it's all been downhill ever since Dilworth was mayor. And I think it's time for a change, another dramatic change. I think we need a whole new set of faces in City Hall. We can't have that same crew running things.
A couple of largest sections of Philadelphia, Roxborough and the Northeast. And the present situation right now, if you want to take SEPTA from Roxborough to the Northeast, it takes approximately an hour and a half. You have to take 3 buses. Say if you want to go from Roxborough to Cotton and the Boulevard, okay, it takes about an hour and a half. Takes 3 buses. Takes a maximum amount of waiting time. When you pay your taxes, certain services, you know, you usually get some kind of little return on that. Not that I rely on SEPTA, but a lot of people do.
You would think so. I don't rely entirely on SEPTA, but I do use SEPTA to commute to work. Fortunately, I take the train, and I take the R7 line, which is about 4 blocks from my house. And then in town, I get off at Market East, and I've got another 4 blocks to walk. And it's a very nice way to travel, but it's not what it could be. It's not as good as it could be.
SEPTA looked at it, they said it's not profitable. But there are, you know, there is a certain service involved there.
It probably isn't profitable. SEPTA, like a lot of the city, is a very high-cost provider of services. And I really think that SEPTA could be rearranged. I really like rail. I really like light rail and heavy rail trolleys and trains. And I think SEPTA doesn't do enough with feeder buses going into the rail lines to bring up the traffic on the rail lines. I don't think you should be taking buses from Roxborough to the northeast. I think there ought to be a train ride somewhere in that trip. I think it would be a lot faster and a lot more efficient for SEPTA. I guess we're out of time. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
And our next speaker is Dorothy Whitehead, Republican candidate for State Representative, 198th District.
Good evening, and I thank the Times very much for inviting me here. I hate to say that this is my first time up in Roxborough. To be invited up here at this time, it is. And I'm glad to be here, that this is part of the area that I'll be running in. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'll make it very short because I'm a community person. I've raised 9 children through that community down in Germantown. I've been there for 15 years, fighting crime on the street, part drugs on the street. I have fought many things in Germantown. Now I think we need some changes in those areas that we can clean up what is there. We have a lot down there. I don't say, when I say Germantown, I do not eliminate Manioc, Chestnut Hill, Roxbury, East Falls. I am sure all our problems are different. If I'm sent to Harrisburg, I will make all of that problem mine. I will not neglect any area because one has more trouble than another one. I think you all deserve the same attention. I also would agree, as the others have said up here before me, and I think we all are for the same thing. So if you send the Republicans to Harrisburg, you're going to get a good bunch going up there, because we all feel like we're fighting for the same things. And sitting up in office in the areas that is more accessible to the people are a wonderful idea. I think it's the best idea, because although the person you send to Harrisburg cannot be in all the office, but they can put people there that's knowledge can help you and get back to the one that you sent to Harrisburg. I think that is very important. It's the greatest way to have the community to be in touch with the person they sent to Harrisburg. And again, I say thank you very much for inviting me over here, and I will be back over in the area very soon. Thank you. Is there any questions? Thank you.
And now may I present Robert O'Donnell, Democratic candidate for State Representative, 198th District.
Thank you. By way of introduction, let me tell you a little bit about the 198th District. It includes the west side of Chestnut Hill, Mount Airy, Germantown, all of East Falls, and all of Allegheny West, and the southeasternmost corner of Roxborough. I currently represent the 198th District, and I'm also the Democratic whip in Harrisburg. If we are in the majority, which I expect this time, I'll be the majority leader by this Thanksgiving. That, for me, is a very, very important responsibility. It gives me an opportunity to shape public policy in Pennsylvania and also to shape the direction of the Democratic Party. I think perhaps more importantly, it provides an opportunity to have an impact much more directly on people's lives, particularly here in the city. I think many people have spoken, and all of you that have listened have indicated a real concern for the state of affairs in the city. The way to go about dealing with those concerns is in some ways in City Hall, and it is also in Harrisburg. Now, the way that has to happen is in terms of taking real responsibility for both funding and accountability for those things that the state should be involved with. Sometimes that's a difficult line to draw, but it's increasingly clear that almost no matter who is elected president, the federal government will not be involved in the cities and involved directly in our problems the way they have historically. The massive federal deficit that's out there is going to effectively prevent the federal government providing funds, for example, to the City of Philadelphia for the tactical police forces that we've enjoyed in the past and for the extra help in city work that has made the city just a little bit cleaner in those eras. So we're not going to be able to look to the federal government. It's also clear that the revenue base of the city, no matter who manages it, is not going to be adequate to the problems that we've got inside this city. And what that means is that if the federal government won't and the city government can't, the state government is the place where the critical decisions are going to be made about how we conduct our lives from the point of view of government. Within the city of Philadelphia, there's a couple problems that are going to emerge over the next year to 5 years. First, the infrastructure issues. By that I mean the things that we've always taken for granted that are there in the form of public service. We've always assumed that there is a functioning port that brings goods in, ships them out, that provides jobs to people there, and provides a stimulus to the Philadelphia economy. That assumption is no longer valid. The port is in very, very serious jeopardy. I think people repeat those kinds of words so often that the public becomes somewhat cynical about hearing them. But I've been a member of the Philadelphia Port Corporation. I'm very familiar with the waterfront, and believe me, that area is in deep trouble. At the same time that that is happening, I think you're reading inaccurately about the problems of SEPTA. The capital funding, meaning for plant and equipment as opposed to for salaries, has been ignored for a very, very long time. People have failed to face the responsibility for providing for adequate capitalization. As a result, not only the train stations are deteriorating, but the actual train lines are deteriorating. The buses are deteriorating. They're getting old. And what that means is a massive infusion of dollars to replace bridges, to replace the L structure, to buy new buses, to replace the signaling systems on the lines, all of that to make a functioning system that we've taken for granted for a long time. So in each of those kinds of areas, and you can enumerate a long list, there's going to be an increasing crisis. That word will recur over the next year to 5 years in economic infrastructure issues. There's also another set of issues which nobody has faced, and that has to do with the funding of what we call social services. We've pretty much taken that for granted too, and that era is over. The state's responsibility will be to step in there and make a decision about who gets helped and how. As a state legislator, one of the important things I do is to receive requests for help with government, and sometimes with problems that government can't even reach. I have a case in my office where an elderly couple in Mount Airy has a retarded child. That child is now an adult. That couple is now reaching the age where they can neither financially nor physically care for that child anymore. They're worried sick. What's going to happen? The state of affairs in the city has been that the funding for mental retardation has gone to court-ordered directives, and it has otherwise not in any way met the increasing demand. As a result, there's a significant chance that for that individual, and for many people like him, there's going to be no place. There's no greater burden on a family than to have to face that kind of fear of the inability to care for your own. The state's responsibility is to care for the mentally retarded and the mentally ill. The city can't, the federal government won't, and in a variety of social services where I don't think anyone could argue that folks are in that problem because of their own fault, in a variety of those kind of situations, the state is going to have to step in. One of the problems we've got in city government is we've had a lot more in the heart than we've had in the head. And I think the city has been moving from the heart. And I don't think it has been well done, and I agree with the criticisms that have been made. The city has attempted to meet problems which are, at their core, social problems, not municipal problems. So the future that I see is a very challenging one for those of us that are candidates in state government, because I think the city will necessarily turn its attention to municipal functions and should: police, fire, streets. And the federal government is going to handle the big issues, defense and whatnot. And I think the state government is going to be the place where the really critical decisions about our lives are going to be made. So it's a challenging time, and I'm very glad to see so many candidates ready to accept that challenge, and so many folks out here to either support them or to question the others. Be happy to take questions.
Mr. O'Donnell, I hope it doesn't sound very naive, but
Go
where
ahead.
does the money come from for social programs in the city of Philadelphia? Just where does it come from? I'm confused about this. This is,
Okay.
I mean, just where do you pull the funding from?
Well, let me give you all the answers to that question. The narrow question is that each of the functions that are performed in the city are usually funded in some percentage by the city government and in some percentage by the state government. So in the example of social services, you would find anywhere from 10 to 40%, depending on the nature of the service, being funded by the city, and anywhere up to the corresponding number being funded by the state government. Or in the case of SEPTA, if you wanted to build a new bridge, 70% used to be paid, 75% I guess, by the federal government, and 16% by the state government, and a small percentage by the local government. But now the federal government's not approving the projects. So what's SEPTA going to do? Not build the bridge, then you close down the train line. Not supply the bus, then you close down the bus traffic. So it's always a percentage kind of a situation, okay? The school district of Philadelphia, for example, there's a statewide effort to try and maintain 50% funding from the state, 50% funding from local school districts. In Philadelphia here, our school district has been funded in excess of 60% by the state of Pennsylvania. So that may or may not answer your question. There is a very short answer to your question. The funding always comes from the same place, which is the taxpayers. And one of the hardest jobs you have in government is to make the balance about where you spend and where you tax. I've never been in front of an audience that has felt that they were the ones who were undertaxed. It's always the folks in the next forum, the next meeting you go to, that apparently are the beneficiaries of this tax system. Very difficult. I don't know if that... Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
I'll ask a question. The problem with the homeless, do you have some views on that? A lot of people have asked me about that.
Yeah. Let me tell you about that. The homeless I think can be thought of in terms of two groups of people. There's one... Huh?
Just two?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to organize it for you. You've got people who are the dramatically homeless who you see every day on a street with no place to go. And they're on steam vents downtown. They're desperate, desperate people in extreme difficulty. The issue of homelessness has focused on those people because they're so visible and they're so dramatic. When you talk about those people, there was an entire report prepared by the Philadelphia Committee for the Homeless, which I recommend to you, that talked about all the characteristics of these folks and how you might help them. Many of them are chronically mentally ill. And because the state institutions have withdrawn from the care of the mentally ill, the streets of Philadelphia find themselves, not filled, that would be a gross overstatement, but find themselves with people who are desperately in need and chronically mentally ill. Those people are now filling many boarding homes in a whole lot of areas of the city. Desperate situation. For those folks, the two things you've got to do is you've got to do direct funding, a small change in the mental health laws to create a more protective kind of environment for those folks. And it is a manageable problem. There is no doubt about it. In Philadelphia, there are people, particularly in the religious community, who are very aggressively involved with caring for the homeless and doing so at rates which I would challenge anyone in private enterprise to meet. There's a nun that runs an operation on 13th Street, which is fantastic. And the cost per person is just remarkably low. It's incredible. What we tried to do at the state level, I'm hearing because I don't want to use the other county's time, what we did at the state level was to get funds directly to that kind of a program. Now what happened was the city stepped in and started to be a conduit for the funds. So you have that struggle, okay? I think we will prevail. I think the homeless problem is manageable. The difficulty is this, that immediately above that level of folks that we just talked about is another huge group of people who are not currently on the street and yet who have no money, period. A young woman, 17 years old,
with a little baby who has no income whatsoever, who is currently living with her grandmother in the living room. Once you establish a program the way we've done here in Philadelphia, which was a mistake, you dealt with not just the homeless as I described it, but a whole nother group of people whose problems have to be addressed, but not at the municipal level.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
And our next speaker will be John Saylor, representing Edward Mezvinsky, Democratic candidate for State Attorney General.
Good evening. My name is John Saylor, and I'm representing Ed Mezvinsky, the Democratic candidate for Attorney General of Pennsylvania. Ed apologizes that he cannot be here tonight. He is in Scranton, and at times like this, getting down to the last weeks of the campaign, we have to spread him and others around the state. I am from Philadelphia, and I also am a member of the Criminal Justice Commission of Philadelphia, in addition to being on the board of the Philadelphia Airport. So I guess some of the things I've heard tonight, I have experienced and have questioned, and I can relate, and I think that's one of the reasons that Ed has asked me to be here tonight. I have some prepared words because there are some points that I think should be gone over, and I really don't want to miss them, and I hope you'll bear with me if I lift up a little bit once in a while reading from a text. I have to say from the outset that I support Ed Mezvinsky for Attorney General because I believe we need a vigorous and active Attorney General in Harrisburg. I think we have some basic rights: the right to walk down the street without getting mugged, the right to sleep in our house at night without someone coming in and robbing us, and also the right to send our kids to schools where there won't be people in the playground selling them drugs. The Attorney General is there to protect us with all of these rights. He is our lawyer. He's not the government's lawyer. He's not the governor's lawyer. He is the people's lawyer. And so it's our choice on November 8th to choose who will be Attorney General. There are two candidates. There's Ed Mezvinsky and there's also Ernie Priate, the District Attorney of Lackawanna County. Let's look at a couple of the problems and how the two candidates would deal with them. On drugs, Ernie Priate says he's the rough and tough District Attorney of Lackawanna County, which is in Scranton, for those of you who are not familiar with Lackawanna County. And if you elect him, he promises to take all the drugs and just end the drug dealers and shove them out of the state of Pennsylvania. Well, this is the same guy who promised his county back in 1977 that he wouldn't plea bargain with any drug dealers, and then when he gets elected, he turns around and plea bargains with approximately 75% of the drug cases in his courts in Lackawanna County. Ed Mezvinsky believes that no one man can tackle this problem in Pennsylvania. He believes the solution to the drug problem, and we're seeing it now in all neighborhoods of Philadelphia, is a community effort with the federal government, with the state government, with the district attorney's office, and most importantly, with the people, the parents, the grandparents, and the children in our community and in our neighborhoods. I'd also like to say that those are the only promises that Ernie Priate has broken, but I'm not going to go into them right now. I'll let you ask him if he arrives this evening. I will say that Ed Mezvinsky will work with the police and people like Bob O'Donnell, trying to get monies to better train and inform our police and the drug enforcement people out there. I'd like to talk about the environment for a moment, which is a very important thing. Mr. Priate will have you think that he is the greatest environmentalist in Smokey the Bear, and that he will clean up the water in the Schuylkill down the street here, off of Manayunk, like he has cleaned up in Lackawanna County. I will tell you that Ernie Priate has never initiated not one criminal prosecution against a toxic polluter in all his years there. He has picked up a handful of cases referred to his office, but he has never gone out on his own and prosecuted one. And when the going got rough last month and the Republicans in Harrisburg were trying to gut the tough, Superfund, toxic cleanup law, where was Ernie the Bear? Ernie was campaigning while Ed Mezvinsky was up in Harrisburg with Bob Casey and the legislators fighting to pass the toughest cleanup bill in Pennsylvania's history. Look, Ed Mezvinsky is not a super DA, and he was never the DA of Lackawanna County, and that's probably a good thing. He has never pretended to be anything else but a man who has dealt with the legislature on the state level, on the federal level, and has also prosecuted a president of the United States as a member of the House Judiciary Committee. He hasn't taken $10,000 in campaign contributions from people who are in the Pennsylvania Crime Report either. And he hasn't taken money from utility political action committees. It's a simple choice. We want an Attorney General who protects Pennsylvanians, not polluters. And I think we want an Attorney General who works for consumers and not utilities. Mezvinsky's a straight shooter. He has a good record as a state representative and as a U.S. congressman, and he's a family man. He has 11 children. I will also say he's a friend, and I have never thought anything else that he was honest and had a heck of a lot of integrity. And I know what he represents. Hopefully, you'll find out what he represents and vote for him on November 8th. Now, I'll entertain any questions you might have. Yes.
I could back up 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and every election, any politician, except to find a bunch of people, the first thing they do is say crime is getting worse. I got a word.
Like to use worser. What do you think? Now, that's
a good
20
word.
years. And we still hear the same thing. And it is worser. I mean, what are you going to do to keep it from getting worser?
Well,
thank you.
Ed has a
I mean, it's the same cry every campaign.
There's no question about it. As a member of the Criminal Justice Commission of Philadelphia, I've seen a lot of requests for monies come in for different programs, and a lot of times on the city level or state level, you just don't have the money to do it. Hopefully, Ed's plan of attack, and if any of you would like that, I'll leave some cards and we'll be able to send it out to you, is basically a public-private partnership, as we heard before, where corporations get involved with fighting crime with funds that they can allocate possibly to the city and to the state. And also, I think, and Ed believes, and I know this, that the community itself obviously is going to have to get mad. And get mad enough and put all their energy into getting the drug dealers out of the schools and out of the neighborhoods. And in addition to that, you need an attorney general who's not afraid to prosecute a guy and lock him up. We have a lot of scum on the streets in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, and today in Reading, of all places. You'd never think it would happen in Reading, but it's happened in Reading. And it's gotten out of hand. And I think if there is a public-private partnership and also a community partnership, some things could really take place that we could, as they say, take a bite out of crime. But education's another thing. We have to educate the kids, and Ed also has a program for education in the schools to educate children to, as they say, just say no. Yes?
The only way you're going to get rid of the drugs and crime is getting crime. Everybody's saying the family, everything else. And tell me once, when they've gotten any of the kingpins, there's drugs all over the whole country, every city, every town. Name one kingpin that's got the books doing at him.
The only one I can name, I can't name him personally, but the federal government nailed a guy, and it took a lot. But I think part of the problem is plea bargaining. You can't plea bargain these guys. And I will say again, Ed's opponent has done it 75% of the time. Ed believes in mandatory sentences, period. Throw the book at them. If they're found guilty, lock them up and let them rot.
Now, my point's this, though. There's big pushes in every area of this country. The police know who they are and everything else. Why don't you politicians make sure that you get them and put them away? The family isn't going to do it.
Well, I can only
The family's
speak...
just going to have a broken heart while these people are still pushing drugs on the street.
I can only speak for my candidate who I represent, and I can tell you that he went after the President of the United States like nobody's business, and I don't think he's going to really think twice about going after a drug pusher. When you mess with the President of the United States, you're messing with real fire.
Yeah, just say no. No, sorry.
Say, thank you very much.
Before we wrap up tonight's program, there are a few people I'd like to thank. Little Danielle Rosanova for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The people who come out tonight, that's what this thing was all about. We acquaint them with the candidates. The staff at the Roxborough Times, Bell of Pennsylvania for loaning us Karen Gowan, who did a great job tonight of introducing the candidates. Wade Cablevision, and the candidates themselves. Thank you and good night.